Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Goolsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
Is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
Yes. No, we're coming to you live. Well, we're live right now, but we won't be when this comes out. But we are live.
Yeah,
and hopefully we'll be then. But we're here in Knox County. It's easier to say than the town name, so that's just what I went with. Yeah. You Alabama that really well.
You know, one of the funniest things. So we're in Nebraska.
That's an easy word to say.
Yeah, for some people.
You nailed it.
Nebraska. I still can't spell it though. But you made me forget. Oh yeah, we're in Nebraska. We're up here to do a habitat management workshop with a bunch of private landowners. The people have been really awesome.
Golly,
isn't it? I mean, there's
some of the best, some of the most hospitable folks. Have been hosting us here.
We've been riding around with a bunch of the biologists that work for the DNR here.
Yeah,
and they've been really awesome and thought provoking.
Yeah,
and sharp.
We kicked it off. I gotta tell the story about coming in on Wednesday because that was quite a journey.
Yeah.
So
I did want to say one thing about one other person we met. We had a landowner that was nice enough, had no idea who we were, but knew the biologists that we were with and let us come hunt. And I asked him, "Have you lived here your whole life?" You remember what he said?
I do.
Not yet. So
one of the coolest dudes I've ever met, and we only met with him for about 30 minutes. But I know, Mr. Paul, you're not listening to this, almost guaranteed. But thank you, and thank you to Scott and Rob and Cassidy and Kyle, and
it's been really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, just everybody kind of rolled out the red carpet to give us the full Nebraska experience, and I'm so thankful that we were able to come in like 48 hours before our talks and learn a lot about the landscape, because I really think that's informed us, not just for the workshop that we're doing tomorrow, but just in general, give us new appreciation and perspectives on turkeys.
I don't think I have ever gone to where I was going to talk, hang out for a couple of days, and then make my talk.
Not just hang out, but get immersed in the landscape.
Oh, yeah. And so all kinds of different landscapes too.
So we came in on Wednesday, and you flew out from Gainesville. I flew out from Atlanta, and I left my house at 6 a.m. You left your house at about 5 a.m. local time. I was at the airport at 5.
Okay.
So you left really early, and then we got on the ground in Omaha. What was that, about 2 in the afternoon?
Something like that.
And
one-ish.
Yeah, then Scott picked us up from the airport, and then we had about a 2-hour drive, and we got to hunt.
Yeah, out to the sandhills.
The Nebraska sandhills.
Yeah, that was cool.
It was wild. And so we were chasing prairie grouse, which I think is the inclusive term that they use for both the sharp-tailed grouse and prairie chickens. We're hunting lesser prairie chickens. And didn't have much success that first afternoon for those species. Both you and I got one shot on a bird. We both whiffed.
One thing I learned about you on this trip is that you're almost as poor of a wing shot as me. It's like you're shooting only about double of what I do, which still is relatively poor.
But what happened is our grouse hunt wasn't going too well, but Scott had told us to go ahead and get our HIP permits because there were still some mourning doves hanging around.
Yeah.
And then he got us on a stock tank with some mourning doves flying around.
I never thought I'd come all the way to western Nebraska. Well, I don't actually. We were probably central Nebraska.
Yeah.
To kill doves.
But
I was tickled to do it.
But it was like all of a sudden we got on the doves, the Alabama came out, and the shot percentages went up.
Oh yeah.
So
we were after those doves.
So we shot a nice little mess of doves. Scott shot most of them still. And
we
then,
shot at most of them.
And then
he
we
shot most of them. We shot at most of them.
And then we got back to the. We finally got to our lodge, our cabin we're staying in on the state park. What was that? It must have been like 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night.
Like
so a long day of traveling. Scott cooked us up the birds. We ate at about 11:30. Crashed. Got up Thursday morning. Went out grouse hunting again. Had a little bit of success. Got to hunt a little bit again this morning, and we finally got on a grouse.
Yep. That was a really interesting experience. And now we're to the landowner that we gave a shout out, Paul.
Yeah.
that just graciously allowed us to just come hunt on his place.
Yeah, just the stereotypical Nebraska gentleman rancher. Rode us around. He had a smile from ear to ear when he got us on birds. It was probably because we were missing most of those birds.
When he heard your accent, he thought you were from New Mexico.
I think it was Arizona. He said,
"Yeah, something."
So you're from Arizona?
Yeah, it was before we spoke.
I mean, Alabama starts with an A, so does Arizona. So I get it. But,
yeah.
But yeah, I had a good time.
So, that was kind of interesting too, because it's these rolling hills, which I naively kind of just expected Nebraska to be flat. I don't know why.
And portions are.
Yeah, but nowhere we've been walking has been flat. In fact, it's been quite hilly. And there are different formations that are leading to that terrain, but in the different places we've been. But just imagine this is a rolling hills landscape, and kind of the tops of the hills, a few of them have some form of agriculture on them. In this particular case, he had some alfalfa that he had been haying on it. And I thought it was kind of interesting when we finally met up with the landowner. He had a pair of binoculars in the truck, and when we roll up, he's looking across the hill about a mile and watching a flock of, I don't even know if it's a flock or a covey. I don't know. But there was a bunch of sharp-tailed grouse, a couple ridges over in this alfalfa patch. So we're going to put the sneak on them. Oh, Alabama sneak.
I think we've covered probably 3 or 4 Alabamas worth of ground in the past 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
My legs
I could have
feel
just about walked back to Alabama with all the walking I've done.
But it's just a vast open landscape. Really kind of breathtaking in a sense. And then
what about the view this morning?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean, we were up on that hill and it was just absolutely breathtaking.
And then but what's really cool too is that they've got these riparian areas that have some really nice oak woodlands dominated by bur oaks. Some of those places have been, taken over by red cedars, and that's a big challenge that poses a lot of challenges for habitat managers in this area. We've been talking a lot about that the past couple of days, and when
a lot
those
of the
cleaned out, those oak woodlands are beautiful. Yeah,
for sure. Well, and the other land uses, I'm sure a lot of people probably think of the corn huskers. They're probably thinking a landscape of corn, and there are certainly places that are dominated by row crops.
Back towards Omaha.
Yeah, sort of in the eastern part of the state. But what else did we see? We've seen a fair amount of alfalfa as well. We've seen some CRP implemented, which is pretty cool. And I mean, there's just vast amounts of rangeland that they're
well. That's what I was going to say. Is the area that we're in now is the predominant land use is rangeland. They're grazing cattle on it. So that was kind of going to be what we wanted to talk about a little bit today, is just the experience from our trip, but also some similarities between habitat conditions for turkeys that we've seen here and even seen in places like Alabama and Florida that we obviously frequent all the time. And
Yeah, we're both travelers of the South. I mean, we're in. I mean, you live in Alabama, I live in Florida, but we're both in Georgia and Mississippi,
Carolinas.
the Carolinas, Tennessee, all around the South constantly. So we have a pretty good feel, I think, for what's going on in that landscape, especially from a turkey's perspective. What are some of those challenges?
Right. And one of the biggest things that's become increasingly apparent to me as I travel not only throughout the South, but places outside of it like we are here, is that there are constraints that managers operate within no matter where you go when it comes to turkeys. There's always trade-offs.
Yeah. Well, with any species, and I think turkeys might be particularly prone to that because they have different needs at different life stages.
Right.
And that, makes it more difficult to navigate some of those challenges. One thing I found interesting about it when we came here, and I think we'll probably get into this more during this episode, is it's different land uses, different soil types,
different climate,
all of those things. But a lot of the habitat challenges here basically are the same as they are in the Southeast.
Right. And those are driven by those constraints that I mentioned, right?
Yeah,
so the one that, and we've been talking about this a lot with the biologists while we've been here, because they mentioned to us that, cattle producers don't want to give up grass grazing areas for like brood rearing cover, for example.
Yeah.
Well, for us, the trade-off is between growing trees and growing turkeys.
Exactly. Grass or trees.
Right.
I mean, we have what did Craig say? We all have our grass problems.
Yeah.
So we have some grass problems as well, but the vastness of the grass here is quite different.
Yeah. Yeah, they and it's not just, the native grasses either, but they also have their own invasive, sod forming grasses.
Right.
Similar to what we do in the Southeast. So here it's primarily smooth brome. Yeah.
So you think about, it's a cool season grass, very similar to fescue if you're in the Mid-South. And I know we've talked about managing grass problems several times now on the podcast, but, the situation with brome to me is very similar to fescue. It's cool season grass, mat forming, and it's invading a lot of the early succession communities.
And in the
I think
Southeast,
some of the people out here in prairie land don't necessarily think the prairie is early succession, since it stays that way in perpetuity.
Yeah. Well, in the Southeast, people commonly think of fescue grass as being a valuable pasture or hay or livestock production foraging grass, and they think of that think of smooth brome the same way here. So they value it for those attributes.
For other objectives, there's some value in that, and it's the same, from what I can gather, a similar story, although it's been around a long time from what I could gather, but initially it was used to, planted, I guess, or converted to that for cattle.
Right. Yeah. So, it poses a huge challenge, just like our grasses do, in trying to eradicate it, not only because of its perceived value by some people, but then also because of the actual difficulty of trying to eradicate it. It just takes work.
Yeah.
And we see the same thing, in the woodlands that we were talking about just a little while ago. So maybe in our woodlands, what we're accustomed to is we have too high a density or a basal area of pine trees, or maybe we have sweet gum invasion, this diminishing our ability to develop an herbaceous layer in the understory that's conducive to poult rearing and nesting. And here, they battle that a lot with cedars. Cedars are a major barrier to that. And then even once they get the cedars out of the way, they have a variety of woody and herbaceous invasive species that they've got to eradicate after that, because they respond to that increase in sunlight availability. So,
Yeah.
I mean, all this is, I've learned from it, and what the point that it's really driven home is that I think that, due to past land use, not only in the Southeast, but really throughout much of the country now, and I mean, I don't want to be dramatic, but the world, but we have such a problem with invasive exotic species that restoration is a difficult, expensive, and long duration process to try to restore these areas back to the point that we can maintain them with a more natural process like prescribed fire.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think you keyed in on something, when I've been mulling all this over, trying to take it in, learn from it, reflect, think about how some of our perspectives might help people in these different situations. And I think one thing that we collectively need to be cognizant of is that we're talking about land uses that we're trying to implement strategies to meet objectives. It's very important for you to clearly articulate what that objective is. And if it's not turkeys, I don't know why you're listening to this, but that's not always the primary objective for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's important for you to understand and articulate what those objectives are. And then after you do that, how do you get to how do you obtain that objective?
Yeah.
And making sure that you're taking care, like for us as fescue, for out here, maybe smooth brome, but without taking care of that issue, and we don't need to get the cart before the horse.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not, let's get back to burning. It's first you have to take that step. Let's prepare the land to receive it so that we can get the responses we desire from that practice.
Yeah, it's not that dissimilar from you need to thin a forest and reduce the canopy before you implement fire. Otherwise, fire's just clearing litter.
Exactly. And while there may be some objectives that you can achieve by not allowing sunlight in and burning,
mm-hmm.
for what the purpose of most of the people I talk to that are using fire, if it has a wildlife habitat objective, the sunlight is the limiting factor.
Right.
The same thing applies to a field or pasture or whatever. That patch of grass, that mat of grass is the problem that we need to deal with,
right,
so that it's ready
right.
to receive those other practices.
And I think another thing that I've learned recently that's very important is understanding the various tools that we have to manage land are a means to an end and not the end themselves.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in, I see it all the time. It's not unique to here. Mm-hmm. It's not unique to the Southeast. It's everywhere, because I do feel like fire is really catching on as an important ecological process.
We all acknowledge
and management tool,
value.
But it is still a means to an end, and that end is a desired vegetation condition that matches the species mm-hmm. that you're focusing on and the life stage and the season that you want to provide habitat for that species during. Mm-hmm. So start with that end state in mind, and then you start to work in those various tools to achieve that desired end state.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. I mean, I've fallen into that.
Absolutely.
I have been, just like, we've probably even done it on the air. I certainly have fallen into, we're just trying to get fire back on the landscape. Not, we're trying to get the vegetation conditions and the function of the system back that comes with systems that used to have frequent fire.
Right.
So, and they don't necessarily, like, one doesn't equate to the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, adding fire doesn't necessarily get you to the function that you're looking for, which is the purpose that you're using it to begin with.
Yeah.
And, like you mentioned earlier, the invasive species, all these plant species everywhere are one reason why.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are hindering us from just being able to go back
to
what those landscapes used to function like. And it's a different suite of species everywhere I go, but very similar problems.
That's right. I think another thing that I've really come to appreciate this week is something that is not, again, unique to here, but maybe I've thought about it more over the past 48 hours than I typically do because of how immersed in the different constraints to management that there are here, to wildlife management specifically. But as wildlife managers, right, oftentimes we feel like it's an us versus them situation where when someone has a competing land use with wildlife management, we look at them as somewhat of an adversary.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody wants to use the land to raise cattle or to grow corn or to grow pine trees, regardless of what it is, we view that as a competing objective to what we want, which is more turkeys.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be somewhat adversarial of a relationship.
Well, in the case of turkeys.
Hold on just a second. I want to hear what you have to say, but I have to finish this thought because I thought it was a good one. Maybe it's not, but at least I
was just going to insert a joke.
Okay.
Lighten it up just a touch.
We'll lighten it up.
I was just going to say, it is adversarial if their objective's not turkeys.
That's true.
So that's all I have.
But that goes both ways too, though, right? Because they oftentimes look at us as adversaries in achieving their objective. So when we come in and we tell a cattle producer, that
kill the grass,
they need
folks.
to kill some grass, they look at you like you got two heads,
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be that way. It needs to be, this is what you need to do. These are best practices to achieve, either your economic objective on the land, your working lands,
mm-hmm.
whether that, again, be timber, cattle, or anything else. And this is the best practices to achieve that. And then we need to be doing the same thing from the wildlife side and saying, if you want to maximize turkey abundance and production on this property, these are the things that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then each side has to make the decision for themselves. What relative trade-offs are they willing to accept to achieve the desired outcome?
Well,
and that's going to be personal.
That's important. You don't have to be on the extreme end. You don't have to go all in. You can try to balance the two. You just need to realize that you're not maximizing either.
Right.
So, another thing that I think as biologists we probably undervalue where we could really contribute in that discussion is, okay, you have these competing objectives. Here are some ways that you could integrate them to try to minimize that trade-off, where you're maximizing the land use for production. I'm thinking from an agricultural standpoint, you're using the landscape to try to maximize the trade-off between producing crops or cattle grazing or whatever it is, growing trees, and making turkeys. So, I guess we've done that some. We've talked about daylighting and
mm-hmm.
and edge feathering and field management and all kinds of things that are ways that people can try to integrate that into their working landscape, I guess, to enhance turkey productivity. Yeah. But it's not necessarily what we would recommend you do if you only had that objective.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think that's a place that we can really help landowners kind of conceptualize how can I paint the landscape, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm still able to grow my crop.
Yeah.
And
I think that's really important because there are some properties here and throughout the U.S. that people are buying, and specifically, they're not looking for a return on that investment. They just want to manage them for wildlife. They're expecting no economic return, and it's great to be in a financial position where you can do that. But most people that own large tracts of rural land are not in that position. And Cassidy said something today. She's one of the biologists that we're working with and is organizing this workshop. she said something that really resonated with me. It didn't at the moment, but as I've thought about it more throughout the day, it did. She essentially made the case that, if these ranchers can't make their land holdings make economic sense, that they're going to be given up to other land uses that are probably even more detrimental to turkeys.
Yep.
And so it's a lot of times it's important for those large tracts of rural land to pay for themselves in some way, at least partially, through practices that may not be the best thing for wildlife. But guess what? Like having a 30,000 acre ranch that is moderate quality turkey habitat is better than having that converted to 30,000 acres of center pivot.
Right. Well, and here, maybe center pivot, but while you were saying that, I kind of thought of Florida again. There, the land is so valuable for development.
Exactly. It's basically higher, better use, right?
Yeah.
Of some type, no matter where you go.
So, in that case, a lot of the ranching landowners, particularly in Central and South Florida, it may not be maximizing habitat quality for wildlife in general. Mm-hmm. But man, that really beats a shopping mall.
That has nothing but mockingbirds in it.
Yeah. I'm just saying, that's our alternative in some of these places is even that extreme where the value of land for development is so extreme that if you don't have other ways to maintain that interest from keeping it wild or rural or undeveloped or whatever you want to say in the particular context, that is a really critical aspect of conservation of turkeys and other wildlife species just in general.
Yeah.
Working lands have to be a big part of that.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't make sense financially in many cases to even keep it undeveloped.
That's a lesson that I need to internalize. Because
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, I get very, sometimes on my soapbox about that, and I want it to be pure, wildlife management focused.
Right.
But
take a step back too. You didn't get brought over here, and you don't get brought anywhere else to tell them how to manage their cows or their trees, unless it's directly pertinent to managing wildlife.
Right.
We're supposed to be telling them what maximizing that looks like, and then we can back off of it, like you were saying earlier. And start to try to integrate those practices into their working landscape in a digestible way.
And I think that the best practitioners that do that are the ones, because we come in and we give people to a place like this and we give people ideas. And then it's up to the biologists that live here and work here to try to help the landowners incorporate those ideas into their practices. And that's best done by people that have that high degree of local knowledge, that live and work alongside these people, that understand their constraints, and they're going to be the ones that have the most effective ideas on how to make the two objectives work together.
Exactly. Like here's what you're trying to accomplish, and the local knowledge with the tools at their disposal and how the landscape works, and how these the finances work and all that sort of stuff. That's not the expertise of the outsider. Yeah. That comes from living and breathing it. Yeah. From the locals.
Yep. Absolutely.
Boots on the ground.
Well, that's good stuff. You want to finish up with one more funny story?
Well, I was going to ask you another question. I was thinking about if we're going to transition there now.
All right.
What has been the most surprising thing since you've stepped foot in Nebraska? What's surprised you the most?
What has surprised me the most about being here is how different it is from Alabama, but how many of the issues are the same.
Yeah. It's a good answer. And
that, people are people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have the same, everybody has their own belief set, everybody has their own way of doing things. everybody has their own limitations and what they can and can't do and what they want to do.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh, you want me to answer the same question? I don't have a good answer right off the top of my head, but
Then why did you expect me to have one?
I didn't. I just wanted to see you squirm over there, and I don't think we're making Charlotte work hard enough, so we need to have her cut out that dramatic pause. And just for everybody out there, you can see how much Charlotte cuts out of this, because he took exactly 4 minutes to answer that question. I'm just kidding. No, there have been several surprising things for me. One, I think I already said it. I naively did not expect the terrain to be so up and down. I don't know why, but I just didn't expect that.
I feel like those hills look steeper to you than they do to me.
Well, that's probably true. So there were some other really interesting things. One thing that was surprising to me when we got out into the sandhills was how much bare ground there was in that prairie.
Yeah.
I was walking around in it, and we were flushing doves left and right. I mean, just out in the middle of the prairie.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we didn't flush that many grouse.
Yeah.
But that was something that was really surprising to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also surprised at the wild marijuana growing everywhere.
The ditch weed.
Yeah, I had no idea.
There's like a constant odor of weed in the air.
Yeah.
And so my brain is constantly telling me, because I'm not used to that. I was like, who's smoking? Like you.
Well, normally when you're dove hunting and you miss one because it was too high, it's not, it's because you're sky shooting. But those things produce a ton of seeds, and the doves are just wearing them out. In fact, we're walking around the prairie looking for little patches of ditchweed because there's going to be doves in it.
But you can't smoke it. That's one of the first questions I asked when I saw it.
Oh my gosh! I really have been very surprised about that. I did not have any idea.
We've known this biologist for a couple hours, and we see the ditchweed growing, and my curiosity was just eating me alive. And so I finally have to ask him, like, can you smoke that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I kept seeing it, I don't know if you heard me, but I kept seeing it, and I was like, that looks just like weed.
Yeah.
And then I finally asked, I was like, what is this plant that's growing everywhere? And he's like, did you not go to college?
No, I think his exact response was, you're a college man, aren't you?
Or yeah, something like that. But and then it took you about 5 minutes before you finally asked if you could smoke it.
So apparently a lot of it was planted around here around World War II, and they were using it, the hemp fiber, to make rope. Yeah. But it's the
Which
same.
Is fascinating.
I guess it's the same species as the stuff that people smoke, but it's not been cultivated to have the psychoactive effects. Yeah,
like it's probably been bred to have really high fiber strength or something,
Yeah.
Anyway, that was quite surprising to me because it's all over the place.
And the doves freaking love it.
Oh my gosh. We sat next to a water tank that had a little patch of marijuana over there, and the doves were just every direction all day long.
I mean, it was an okay shoot.
Yeah. I was thinking about it. There's only been one time that no. I actually just thought of a second time. I have hunted twice where I had a really good dove hunt and we weren't on a planted field.
Yeah, like a prepared, cultivated dove field.
And one of those was a burned field. It was just old field that had just been burned, and that was a jam up one. And then in North Carolina, when I was in the sandhills there, coincidentally, because this dove hunt when we were around the water hole was in the sandhills. Which a lot of overlap in the plant communities. The one in North Carolina doesn't have weed everywhere, but I was hunting a water hole in that instance as well, and we had a really good dove hunt on that too. Mm-hmm. But So that one was surprising. I don't know if that was the funny story that you were going to bring up, but to me that was that's been pretty interesting to see.
Well, in that last episode that we recorded, I talked a lot about bathrooms.
Yes.
Specifically truck stop bathrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I even got a couple of messages from listeners that asked me to stop picking on truck stop bathrooms. But we had an encounter with a different type of bathroom today that actually made us late to our first meeting of the day because we were going from our sharptail hunting ground coming back to the state park where we're meeting with biologists to go look at the site where we're going to do the
field day,
the field day tomorrow. And we were late because we got blocked by the porta potty truck.
Yeah, so it rained. Oh my gosh, this morning?
Yeah.
That's another thing that was surprising.
That was the wildest weather I've ever been a part
Yeah.
of. It was so schizophrenic. I've never seen anything like it.
When the initial thunder that woke both of us up, we're talking about wee hours of the morning.
3 a.m. I looked at my phone.
So we heard this crackle, and I guess I've heard the rolling thunder.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've ever experienced it over planes like this.
Yeah.
But it lasted for like minutes, it seemed like.
Yeah.
I literally was sitting there like, is that thunder? No, that's got to be something else. Because
it sounds
just
different
was so
because
long.
you don't get the reverberation, the echo off the trees.
Yeah.
Like we're used to at home.
Yeah. It was just such a wild thing. But anyway, it rained a lot in that storm front, which they swore to us it was not going to rain while we were over here. But anyway, this storm popped up. It was really intense. That was wild, but then it made all the roads wet, as rain usually does. And the Porta-John truck.
Water is wet.
The Porta-John truck gets stuck blocking the driveway into this property.
He was trying to bring it in for a wedding this afternoon. They're having a wedding on the ranch down by the river, and the porta potty man got stuck.
Yeah.
And so we had to drive out through another pasture and go around.
Yeah.
But yeah, that weather this morning was funny because I step outside and right over our cabin, it's pouring down rain. There's like a little bit smaller than marble sized hail falling every here and there. And then I look out to the east and the sky is clear. The sun is rising. It's coming up over the horizon. Just like pretty beautiful orange, orb coming up over the horizon. And then I look back to the west and there's a rainbow over there. So really wild weather.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
But I've had a blast here, and
oh man, it's been so fun. And
I hope that I really appreciate some of the takeaways that I've gotten from this trip that we talked about in this episode, and I hope that that helps some people change their perspective and look at things a little bit differently as well.
Yeah, and I think it's good. We have a fair amount of listeners in Nebraska.
Yeah, big turkey hunt destination.
Yeah, and I can see why. We've seen a bunch of turkeys since we've been here.
Yeah,
but they're our concerns about the turkey populations here, and we don't want to only be relevant to the South. I guess. And maybe that will help people reflect on that if you're listening to us in some of these other landscapes. That a lot of the concepts that we're talking about and the problems, they may originate from a different practice or land use or something, but a lot of those things seem to be pretty similar.
Yeah. What differs is the competing objectives on the land and the species that you have to manage and the tools that you have to manage them with.
Yeah. So, and it may tweak how it has to be implemented to fit into that landscape, but, a lot of the challenges to turkeys are principally the same things.
Yep.
Particularly here, nesting cover, we both have acknowledged that seems to be closer to limiting than brooding cover.
Yeah.
Or they're closer together as limiting factors here than we see in the South typically.
Yeah, we're used to seeing a lot of nesting cover.
Yeah, I regularly see nesting cover in the South, and irregularly see high quality brooding cover. But here, the nesting cover is more limiting.
Yeah. And the brooding cover still needs a lot of help. And that's been really apparent to me and it's something I mentioned to you when we're kind of talking about what are the highlights we're going to hit in this episode, is that it being here cemented for me that brooding cover really does not happen by accident.
Yes. Yeah, it's deliberate actions, and even some of the steps that you take, like applying fire, might have steps before them before you can get there, like the cool season mat forming grass. Yeah. So, I think that's important. It's deliberate. The nice thing about brooding cover is if you are deliberate about it and you take the care to get the land ready to receive those treatments, you can develop high quality brooding cover really quickly, which is much better than something else being limiting that takes years or even decades. So, another problem out in Nebraska, in some areas, there's nowhere to roost, right? We've talked about that in some landscapes. That would take a long time to fix. Whereas brooding cover, that can be a same year ordeal.
Yep. Cool. Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I know we've got several events to be a part of, and they've been really hospitable out here. So I definitely want to partake in some of these other events. So I guess we can cut it off here unless you have something else you want to leave the audience with.
Nope. I'm good. Enjoyed the time out here. Enjoyed the people.
Yeah.
Thanks to them for being so hospitable, and look forward to participating in a banquet that's a fundraiser for a local conservation group here tonight, and then workshop all day tomorrow. So
yeah, we'll probably post some stuff. I guess you probably, if you're following us on social media, you've probably seen a few posts here in the past several days before this episode went live. Yeah. But yeah,
I dropped some photos in my story today. Just if you want to go on there and get a look at the landscape that we've been talking about. Yeah,
I'm planning to put some stuff out. I'll probably put some the same day this comes out as well, so that people can take a look at that. But I can't stress enough how much we appreciate all the support from folks out there. That was one of the reasons that we got invited out here. Is a couple listeners out here thought we would come out and be fun to have on the workshop. So we wouldn't be able to do this without all of the support, and we're trying to stay the mission and cover those topics that you want to hear. So take a moment, if you haven't already, to rate the podcast, drop us a note, send us an email, however you want to contact us. If there's something you want us to cover, let us know. Yep. If you have questions, let us know. But we really appreciate all the support.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.